Imagine standing on a patch of unremarkable earth, unaware that beneath your feet lies an entire city, vanished from memory, swallowed by time. This isn't the plot of a fantasy novel. It's the reality of our planet's hidden history. Across the globe, from the Indus Valley to the depths of the Mediterranean, lost cities have lain dormant for centuries, waiting to shatter the stories we've told ourselves about human progress. Think about that for a moment. Entire metropolises, bustling with life, innovation, and culture, simply disappeared only to resurface when least expected, forcing us to rewrite the textbooks. These aren't just ruins, they're time capsules, packed with clues that append everything we thought we knew about how civilizations rise, thrive, and vanish. Take Mohenjo-Daro, a city so advanced for its time that its streets were laid out in perfect grids, with drainage systems rivaling modern engineering, all while the pyramids of Egypt were still being built. Or Heracleion, a glittering port city that vanished beneath the waves, its statues and temples preserved like snapshots of a forgotten world. These places don't just fill gaps in history, they explode the myth that innovation moved in a straight line from primitive to advanced. Instead, they reveal a tapestry of human ingenuity, woven with threads we're only now beginning to untangle. How many more cities lie buried, holding secrets that could redefine our understanding of technology, governance, or even spirituality? This video is your ticket to those hidden worlds. We'll journey through jungles, dive beneath oceans, and scan deserts from the sky to uncover how these lost cities didn't just exist. They thrived, often in ways that stump archaeologists today. Why did Cahokia, North America's answer to ancient Rome, collapse so mysteriously? How did Göbekli Tepe's builders erect monumental temples before humans even invented the plow? And what can the fate of these places teach us about our own cities? As climate change and time threaten to erase them too, the stones are speaking, and their stories are more urgent than ever. So let's dig in, because history isn't just about the past, it's about the future we're shaping right now. A lost city isn't just a place where people once lived, it's a mystery wrapped in layers of earth, water, or legend waiting to rewrite history. Picture this, a thriving metropolis humming with life, suddenly abandoned to the elements. Maybe a river changes course, cutting off its water supply. Maybe invaders sweep through, or a volcano buries it in ash. Over time, nature claims the streets, and memory fades into myth. That's the eerie magic of lost cities. They're not merely ruins like the Parthenon or the Colosseum, still standing as reminders of the past. These places vanish completely, slipping into whispers and half-remembered stories, until someone stumbles over a carved stone or a sunken statue, and the ground gives up its secrets. Take Pompeii, frozen in a single catastrophic moment by Mount Vesuvius. The ash preserved bread in ovens, paintings on walls, even the hollow spaces where bodies once lay. It's a snapshot of Roman life, yes, but also a stark lesson. Civilizations can be erased in an instant. Then there's Angkor Wat, swallowed by Cambodia's jungles for centuries. When explorers first hacked through the vines, they found not just a temple but an entire hydraulic city, with canals and reservoirs so advanced they rival modern engineering. These cities force us to ask, how many other societies reached heights we've forgotten? What makes a city lost isn't just its disappearance, it's the way its rediscovery shatters assumptions. For generations, historians thought the Maya were peaceful stargazers until Tikal's murals revealed brutal warfare. They assumed monumental architecture required kings and slaves, until Gerbeckly Teep proved hunter-gatherers could erect temples millennia before pharaohs ruled. Every time a lost city resurfaces, it's like finding a missing puzzle piece, one that changes the whole picture. And here's the thrilling part, we've only scratched the surface. For every Petra or Machu Picchu, there are dozens still hidden, their stories locked in soil and stone. The earth keeps its secrets well, but not forever. Buried beneath the sands of modern-day Pakistan for nearly 4,000 years, Mohenjo-Daro doesn't just surprise archaeologists, it completely upends what we thought possible for ancient urban life. Picture walking through a city from 2,500 years before the Common Era, where every street runs in a perfect grid, where every brick is the exact same size, and where a sophisticated drainage system channels wastewater out of homes and into covered sewers. This isn't the work of some later civilization looking back on a golden age. This is the Indus Valley people doing it first, and in some ways doing it better than many cultures that came after. What's truly remarkable isn't just the engineering, it's what's missing. Unlike the pyramids of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, Mohenjo-Daro has no grand palaces, no towering temples, no obvious seat of a king or priestly class. Instead, the city's layout suggests something radical for its time, a society built on equality and shared governance. The houses, while varying in size, don't scream of extreme wealth or poverty. The public wells are evenly distributed, ensuring everyone had access to clean water. Even the bricks themselves follow a standardized ratio, hinting at centralized planning and mass production centuries before the Romans mastered it. Then there's the mystery of the Great Bath, a massive, watertight pool at the heart of the city, lined with bitumen to prevent leaks. Was it a ritual space? A public gathering point, a prototype for urban water management? No one knows for sure, but its precision speaks volumes. And let's not forget the city's hidden resilience. Built in a flood-prone region, Mohenjo-Daro's elevated platforms and thick walls suggest its people didn't just adapt to their environment, they engineered around it. Yet for all its advancements, the city's end remains as enigmatic as its origins. By 1900 BC, the streets were empty. No signs of invasion, no evidence of a sudden catastrophe, just a slow, quiet fade. Some theories point to shifting rivers, others to climate change or even a breakdown in trade. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is that Mohenjo-Daro's greatest strength, its reliance on meticulous order, became its weakness. When the system faltered, there may have been no single leader to rally the people, no centralized authority to steer recovery. One thing's certain, this wasn't some primitive experiment in urban living. It was a fully realized metropolis, a testament to what humans can achieve without kings or gods dictating their blueprint. And that's what makes Mohenjo-Daro so thrilling. It forces us to ask, how many other societies thrived outside the traditional narratives of power and hierarchy? How much of human history have we gotten wrong because we assumed the loudest voices, the pharaohs, the emperors, were the only ones worth hearing? The stones of Mohenjo-Daro whisper a different story. One where innovation didn't need a tyrant to fuel it, and where a city's greatness lay not in its monuments, but in the quiet genius of its everyday design. Imagine a city so vital to ancient trade that its name was whispered from the Nile Delta to the shores of Greece, only to vanish without a trace, sinking beneath the Mediterranean's waves as if it had never existed. That's the story of Heracleion, Egypt's legendary port city that served as the gateway between continents. For centuries, it was thought to be a myth, a place mentioned in scattered texts and inscriptions but lost to time. Then, in the year 2000, underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio and his team made a discovery that would rewrite history. Their sonar scanners revealed colossal statues, gold coins, and the remnants of grand temples, all preserved in eerie silence under 30 feet of water. What emerges from the silt is a snapshot of a city at the crossroads of civilizations. Heracleion wasn't just Egyptian, it was a cultural whirlwind where Greek merchants haggled beside pharaonic officials, where the gods of two worlds shared temple walls. The artifacts tell the tale. A 5-meter-tall statue of Hapi, the Nile's fertility god, stands beside steles inscribed in both hieroglyphs and ancient Greek. Bronze weights shaped like dolphins, used by traders from distant islands, mingle with Egyptian amulets. Even the ships found here are a revelation, some built in classic Egyptian style, others with the curved hulls of Greek vessels, their cargo holds still packed with jars of wine and olive oil. But how does a city this prosperous simply disappear? The answer lies in the very ground it was built on. Heracleion stood on unstable sediment, a delta constantly reshaped by the Nile's whims. Add a series of earthquakes, possibly the same ones that toppled the lighthouse of Alexandria, and rising sea levels, and the city never stood a chance. Layers of clay and sand liquefied beneath its foundations, swallowing streets and monuments in a slow-motion collapse. It's a haunting parallel to today's coastal cities, from Venice to Miami, grappling with the same forces of subsidence and climate-driven sea level rise. Perhaps the most poignant discovery isn't a treasure, but a simple slab of stone, the decree of size, a towering stele that once stood in the city's heart. Its inscription, duplicated word for word on the Rosetta Stone, helped decode hieroglyphs centuries later. In a twist of fate, the very city that vanished preserved the key to understanding ancient Egypt's written legacy. Heracleion's fate is a reminder that no civilization, no matter how wealthy or well-connected, is immune to nature's whims. Its ruins, now visited by divers instead of merchants, whisper a warning across the centuries. Prosperity is fragile, and the sea always reclaims its own. Yet there's also hope in its story. For 1,200 years, the city's secrets lay hidden but intact, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Who knows what other lost gateways might still be out there, buried beneath waves or sand, ready to rewrite our past once more. Göbekli Tepe doesn't just challenge history, it smashes it to pieces. Nestled in the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, this 11,000-year-old site is a puzzle wrapped in stone. Picture 20 massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, arranged in precise circles and carved with foxes, scorpions, and lions so vivid they seem to leap from the rock. Here's the mind-bending part. These stones were erected around 9,000 years before the Common Era, a staggering 7 millennia before Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid. And yet, the people who built them hadn't even invented farming. For decades, archaeologists assumed monumental architecture was born from surplus, that only once humans settled down to grow crops could they spare the time and labor to build temples. Göbekli Tepe flips that logic on its head. This wasn't a society with granaries full of wheat or rulers commanding armies of workers. These were hunter-gatherers, people who should have been too busy foraging to carve 20-ton pillars and drag them across the landscape. So why did they do it? The answer might lie in the carvings themselves. The animals aren't just decorations, they're symbols, possibly part of a belief system so powerful it inspired entire communities to come together in a way no one thought possible for their time. The scale of labor here is jaw-dropping. Without beasts of burden or metal tools, teams would have quarried the limestone from nearby ridges, shaped it with flint chisels, and hauled it using ropes and log rollers. This wasn't the work of a few families. It suggests coordination on a level unseen until the rise of cities thousands of years later. And then there's the mystery of the burials. Recent excavations reveal that the pillars weren't just standing stones. They were markers for the dead, with human skulls carefully placed in niches. their bones etched with ritualistic cuts. What's even more startling is what happened to Göbekli Tepe after its use. Around 8000 BC, the entire site was deliberately buried, filled in with thousands of tons of earth and rubble. It wasn't an attack or a natural disaster, it was a choice. Someone wanted these stones to vanish, sealing them away like a time capsule. Was it a sacred act, a way to retire a holy place without desecration? Or was it an attempt to preserve knowledge for future generations? The implications are profound. If spirituality, not agriculture, drove humanity's first great building projects, then we've been telling the story of civilization backward. Maybe it wasn't bread that built the first temples, maybe it was belief. Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider what hunter-gatherers were capable of, not as primitive nomads but as visionary architects of their own destiny. And with less than 10% of the site excavated, who knows what other revelations still lie buried, waiting to rewrite the story of human ingenuity once again. Just across the Mississippi River from modern-day St. Louis, a sprawling city once rose from the floodplains, its skyline dominated by earthen pyramids that rivaled the monuments of Egypt. This was Cahokia, North America's greatest pre-Columbian metropolis, a bustling hub of 20,000 people at its peak, with trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Picture a vast plaza flanked by towering mounds, the largest, Monk's Mound, covering more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza's base. At its height around 1050 CE, Cahokia wasn't just a settlement. It was the beating heart of a civilization that mastered astronomy, agriculture, and urban planning centuries before European ships appeared on the horizon. What's staggering about Cahokia isn't just its scale, but its sophistication. The city's layout was a celestial map, with mounds aligned to mark solstices and equinoxes. The woodhenge, a circle of towering cedar posts, functioned as a solar calendar, tracking the seasons with precision that would make modern engineers nod in respect. Beneath the soil, archaeologists have found copper workshops, intricate pottery, and evidence of a continent-wide trade network that moved shells from Florida, obsidian from Wyoming, and mica from the Appalachians. This wasn't some isolated tribal village, it was a cosmopolitan center where ideas and goods flowed as freely as the Mississippi itself. Yet the most haunting discovery isn't in the artifacts, but in the earth. Excavations reveal mass graves near Mound 72, where young men and women were buried alongside elite figures, their bones suggesting ritual sacrifice. Some skeletons show signs of malnutrition, others of violent trauma. These finds paint a complex picture, a society capable of breathtaking communal projects, yet perhaps strained by inequality or external pressures. Then, around 1400 CE, the unthinkable happened. Cahokia emptied, the grand plazas fell silent, the mounds were left to the weeds, and the people vanished. No invasion, no recorded disaster, just a slow unraveling. Clues point to a perfect storm of crises: deforestation leading to erosion, overhunting depleting food sources, and prolonged droughts disrupting agriculture. Some researchers suggest internal strife or a breakdown in leadership accelerated the collapse. Whatever the cause, Cahokia's fate is a stark lesson in sustainability. What makes this abandoned city so compelling isn't just its mystery, but its legacy. Modern St. Louis was built literally atop its outskirts, oblivious to the civilization that preceded it. Cahokia's mounds were later plowed for farmland, its history dismissed as the work of primitive cultures. Only in the 20th century did archaeologists begin to grasp its true significance, a thriving, innovative society that defied every stereotype about pre-colonial North America. Cahokia forces us to confront uncomfortable truths. civilizations don't collapse overnight, and their downfalls are rarely simple. They're the result of intertwined environmental, social, and political threads fraying over time. As we grapple with climate change and resource depletion today, Cahokia's silent mounds stand as both a warning and a testament proof that even the grandest cities are fleeting, and that the land remembers what history books often forget. Plato's story of Atlantis isn't just a myth, it's a riddle wrapped in an enigma, one that's fueled expeditions, debates, and wild theories for over 2,000 years. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE, he describes an advanced island kingdom beyond the Pillars of Hercules, rich in gold, crystal, and exotic wildlife. Its people, he claims, were master engineers constructing concentric rings of canals and bridges, thriving until their arrogance angered the gods. In a single day and night, the entire island sank beneath the waves, vanishing forever. But here's the twist. Plato insists this wasn't fiction. He frames it as a true account passed down from Egyptian priests, a cautionary tale about hubris and divine retribution. So, was Atlantis real? The short answer, probably not as Plato described it, but the long answer is far more fascinating. Archaeologists and historians have spent centuries chasing shadows, linking Atlantis to everything from the Azores to Antarctica. Yet the most compelling connections aren't found in the deep ocean, they're buried in the ashes of the Mediterranean. Take the Minoan civilization, a Bronze Age maritime power centered on Crete. Around 1600 BC, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted with a force dwarfing Krakatoa. The explosion triggered tsunamis that may have devastated Minoan ports, while ash blotted out the sun for years. Sound familiar? A thriving seafaring culture brought low by nature's fury. It's easy to see how such an event could warp into legend over centuries of retelling. But the parallels don't stop there. The Minoans were technological marvels for their time, with multi-story palaces featuring flush toilets, advanced drainage systems, and vibrant frescoes depicting bull-leaping rituals. Their influence stretched across the Aegean, much like Plato's description of an empire ruling over other islands and parts of the continent. Even the Minoans' abrupt decline fits the Atlantis narrative, not from a single cataclysm, but a cascade of disasters. Thera's eruption, followed by invasions from Mycenaean Greeks, and possibly even a trade collapse triggered by climate change. Yet if Atlantis was inspired by the Minoans, why did Plato place it beyond Gibraltar? Here's where myth and memory twist together. Thera's eruption wasn't just a local event. Its climatic effects rippled across the globe, with tree rings in Ireland and California recording years of stunted growth. For Bronze Age societies, this would have felt like the end of the world, a trauma preserved in flood myths from Mesopotamia to the Americas. By Plato's era, the details may have blurred, merging with sailors' tales of distant lands or even older memories of lost cities like Helike, a Greek town swallowed by the sea in 373 BC after an earthquake. The allure of Atlantis isn't just about solving a historical whodunit. It's about why we're so drawn to the idea of a lost golden age. From Nazi occultists to New Age mystics, everyone projects their fantasies onto Atlantis, a mirror for whatever we fear or desire. But the real lesson might be simpler. Whether inspired by Thera, Helike, or pure imagination, Atlantis endures because it speaks to a universal truth. Civilizations rise, they reach too far, and sometimes they vanish without a trace. And in that sense, Atlantis isn't just a place. It's a warning, one etched not in stone, but in the collective memory of humanity itself. Hidden in the rugged cliffs of southern Jordan, Petra doesn't just rise from the earth, it's carved directly into it. The first glimpse of the treasury, its most iconic facade, is like stumbling upon a mirage, a towering monument of rose-red sandstone, its columns and statues chiseled with such precision they rival the grandeur of any classical temple. But this isn't the work of Greeks or Romans. Petra was the masterpiece of the Nabateans, a nomadic Arab tribe who transformed this barren canyon into the beating heart of a trade empire stretching from Arabia to the Mediterranean. And their greatest innovation wasn't just the artistry of their buildings, it was the ingenuity of their survival in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. Imagine a city where every drop of water was precious. The Nabateans didn't just adapt to the desert, they conquered it. Through a network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipelines, they channeled flash floods into reservoirs, turning a land of droughts into an oasis capable of supporting 30,000 people. Their hydraulic system was so advanced that some channels still function today, 2,000 years later. But Petra wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was a cultural crossroads. Caravans laden with frankincense from Oman, silks from China, and spices from India would converge here, their goods taxed by Nabatean rulers who grew wealthy as the gatekeepers of global trade. The city's very layout reflected this cosmopolitan spirit. Tombs carved in Assyrian styles, temples adorned with Egyptian motifs, and theaters built in Roman fashion. Yet Petra's brilliance also sowed the seeds of its decline. As Rome expanded its empire, the Nabateans' strategic location made them inevitable targets. In 106 CE, Emperor Trajan annexed the kingdom, redirecting trade routes to bypass Petra entirely. Without the flow of goods, the city's lifeblood dried up. Earthquakes in the 4th and 7th centuries crumbled its structures, and by the Middle Ages, Petra was forgotten by all but local Bedouin tribes. It wasn't until 1812 that Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as an Arab scholar, rediscovered the city for the West, proof that even the grandest achievements can vanish from memory when politics and economics shift. What makes Petra's story so haunting isn't just its physical beauty, but the fragility it represents. Here was a civilization that thrived in the impossible, bending nature to its will only to be undone by forces beyond its control. The very cliffs that shielded it became its tomb, preserving its facades like a fossilized heartbeat. Today, as tourists trek through the sick to gasp at the treasury's glow at sunrise, they're walking in the footsteps of merchants, kings, and pilgrims who once made this city the center of their world. Petra stands as a monument to human resilience and a silent warning about the tides of history that can sweep even the mightiest cities into shadow. Angkor Wat's towering spires may be Cambodia's postcard image, but the real marvel of this ancient metropolis lies beneath the jungle floor. For centuries, visitors assumed the temple complex stood alone, a solitary masterpiece of the Khmer Empire. Then came LiDAR, a laser mapping technology that peeled back the canopy like lifting a veil. What it revealed was staggering, not just a ceremonial center, but an urban sprawl the size of modern Los Angeles, home to nearly 1 million people at its peak in the 12th century. This wasn't just a city, it was a hydraulic empire, an engineered landscape where canals, reservoirs, and aqueducts turned monsoons into lifeblood. Picture a network of waterways so vast it made Venice look quaint. The Khmer didn't just adapt to their environment, they rewrote it. At its heart lay the West Barre, a reservoir stretching 5 miles long and 1.6 miles wide, holding over 50 million cubic meters of water, enough to fill 20,000 Olympic swimming pools. But this wasn't just for show. These reservoirs acted as liquid highways, flushing rice paddies during dry seasons and preventing catastrophic floods when the rains came. The system was so precise that engineers today still debate how they maintained water pressure across gradients as slight as 1 meter per kilometer. The LiDAR scans did more than expose canals, they unearthed an entire invisible city. Beneath the roots of kapok trees lay traces of wooden homes, marketplaces, and even neighborhood temples, arranged in a fractal pattern radiating from Angkor Wat like spokes on a wheel. This was urban planning on a scale unmatched until the Industrial Revolution, all achieved without steel or concrete. The Khmer's secret, laterite, a porous clay that hardened when exposed to air, forming perfect conduits for their aquatic grid. Yet Angkor's brilliance also contained the seeds of its undoing. That same water system, so meticulously engineered, may have doomed the city when climate shifts disrupted rainfall patterns. Sediment cores from the reservoirs tell a grim tale. Prolonged droughts in the 14th century, followed by devastating floods that clogged canals with silt. Without flowing water, the carefully balanced ecosystem collapsed. Crops failed, diseases spread, and the Khmer elite likely abandoned the city for wetter lowlands, leaving their stone temples as mere skeletons of a civilization that once tamed the monsoons. What makes Angkor's story so haunting isn't just its scale, it's the paradox. Here was a society that mastered water with Bronze Age tools, creating a metropolis that dwarfed medieval Paris or London. Yet their greatest strength, total dependence on hydraulic control, left them vulnerable to the very element they'd conquered. As modern megacities from Bangkok to Houston grapple with rising seas and sinking ground, Angkor stands as both a triumph and a warning. No engineering, no matter how advanced, can defy nature forever. And perhaps most humbling of all, we're still finding new corners of this lost jungle empire, proof that even the mightiest civilizations leave puzzles buried in their wake. Buried deep beneath the dusty plains of Shaanxi province lies a secret even grander than the famed Terracotta army, an entire underground empire, painstakingly crafted to serve China's first emperor in the afterlife. While the world marvels at the 8,000 clay warriors standing guard over Kinshi Huang's tomb, fewer realize these soldiers are just the tip of a sprawling necropolis, a mirror image of his capital city, Xianyang, recreated in astonishing detail. This isn't merely a burial site. It's a declaration that not even death could limit the ambitions of a ruler who unified China, standardized its writing system, and built the earliest version of the Great Wall. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Current excavations reveal a subterranean complex covering 38 square miles, with palaces, stables, and even parks populated by bronze birds and musicians frozen mid-performance. The terracotta warriors themselves are just the outer garrison, positioned to defend the emperor's unexcavated central tomb, a pyramid-shaped mound rumored to contain rivers of mercury, celestial maps on its ceiling, and booby traps to deter intruders. What's chilling isn't just the craftsmanship, but the logic behind it. Kinshi Huang didn't just want treasure buried with him. He wanted his entire administration to continue ruling in the next world. Archaeologists have found terracotta scribes with bamboo slips, charioteers with horses, and even acrobats, a microcosm of imperial society preserved in clay. The technology behind this silent city is as fascinating as its purpose. Each warrior's face is unique, likely modeled after real soldiers, with intricate hairstyles reflecting rank and ethnicity. Their weapons, real bronze swords and crossbows, still bear factory inscriptions tracking their makers, an early example of mass production accountability. But the real genius lies in what we can't see. Ground-penetrating radar hints at an underground network of corridors lined with lacquered wooden panels, while soil samples show dangerously high mercury levels, lending credence to ancient texts describing rivers and seas of the toxic metal simulating the empire's waterways. Yet for all its grandeur, the tomb's greatest secret remains untouched. The central burial chamber lies unopened, partly out of respect, partly due to fears that exposure could destroy priceless artifacts like the possibly silk-draped walls or the emperor's remains themselves. Chinese archaeologists, armed with robotic probes and non-invasive scanners, inch closer each year, but the full truth of Kinshi Huang's vision may stay hidden for decades. This silent city forces us to rethink what innovation means. Here was a ruler who channeled the cutting-edge science of his era: standardized measurements, advanced metallurgy, hydraulic engineering, not just to improve life but to conquer death itself. In a way, he succeeded. While his dynasty collapsed within years of his passing, his terracotta empire endures, a testament to humanity's endless drive to outpace mortality, one clay soldier at a time. And somewhere beneath that untouched mound, the first emperor waits, his greatest treasures and secrets still locked away, challenging us to unravel the full extent of his ambition. Rising above the Guatemalan rainforest like stone sentinels, Tikal's pyramids aren't just ruins, they're mathematical marvels. The Maya didn't just build upward, they encoded their understanding of the cosmos into every step. Take Temple Roman 4, soaring 230 feet into the jungle canopy. Climb its steep stairs at dawn during the spring equinox, and you'll witness the sun's rays perfectly align with the temple's crest, casting shadows that slithered like serpents down its sides, a celestial spectacle designed to mirror their creation myth. This was a city where astronomers doubled as architects, where buildings weren't merely shelters but calendars in stone, tracking Venus cycles with precision that would take Europe another 500 years to match. Yet beneath this brilliance ran an undercurrent of vulnerability. Tikal's survival depended on an intricate dance with nature. Unlike the Nile or the Euphrates, the Maya lowlands lacked major rivers, forcing them to master rainwater harvesting. Their reservoirs, lined with waterproof plaster, could hold millions of gallons, enough to sustain 60,000 people through dry seasons. But their greatest strength became their fatal flaw. Tree ring studies from nearby caves reveal a devastating truth. Between 800 and 930 CE, the region suffered waves of drought so severe that rainfall dropped by half. Reservoirs evaporated, crops withered, and the very glue of Maya society, corn, the sacred grain woven into their myths, failed them. Warfare accelerated the collapse. For centuries, Tikal had vied with rival city-states like Calakmul in a brutal game of thrones, their battles recorded on stelae adorned with captive kings. But as drought tightened its grip, conflict turned desperate. Archaeologists find mass graves filled with victims of blunt force trauma, their bones telling stories of sieges and starvation. The final acts were chillingly mundane. In the city's last days, someone placed a crude clay pot atop the grand stucco frieze of Temple I, offering a handful of shells, a pauper's sacrifice where once lavish ceremonies had unfolded. What makes Tikal's fall so unsettling isn't just its suddenness, but how thoroughly it was forgotten. Within generations, the jungle swallowed the plazas where ball players once battled, the palaces where scribes painted codices, the observatories where priests predicted eclipses. When Spanish conquistadors arrived 7 centuries later, they dismissed the vine-choked pyramids as natural oddities, unable to conceive that indigenous people had built them. Even today, less than 20% of the city has been excavated, a humbling reminder that our grasp of the past is always fragmentary. The lesson of Tikal isn't about inevitability, it's about complexity. This wasn't a single catastrophic failure, but a cascade of interconnected cracks: climate stress, political strife, ecological overreach. As modern cities from Phoenix to Bangalore grapple with dwindling water supplies, Tikal's silent stones urge us to listen. Civilizations don't collapse when resources disappear, but when their systems can't adapt. The Maya themselves survived, their descendants still thriving in Guatemala today. only their grandest cities faded, leaving behind pyramids that now host toucans instead of kings, monuments not to human folly, but to the delicate balance between ingenuity and the inexorable forces of nature. Beneath the sun-baked plains of Turkey's Cappadocia region lies an engineering marvel that defies logic, a labyrinthine city carved not upward into the sky, but downward into the volcanic rock. Derinkuyu isn't just a cave or a tunnel. It's an 18-story deep metropolis complete with stables, chapels, wineries, and even schools, all hidden from the world above. Picture a vertical fortress where 20,000 people could vanish in plain sight, sealed behind massive rolling stone doors that no invading army could breach. This wasn't built for permanence, it was a survival bunker on a scale unimaginable today, a testament to human ingenuity under siege. The brilliance of Derinkuyu lies in its details. Ventilation shafts, some stretching over 150 feet to the surface, ensured fresh air circulated even at the lowest levels. Ingenious wells tapped underground water sources, while narrow, twisting corridors could be blocked at a moment's notice with disc-shaped stones, each weighing up to half a ton. These weren't just doors, they were defensive masterpieces designed to roll into place like ancient bank vaults, their small peepholes allowing defenders to attack while remaining shielded. And the layout itself was a work of strategic genius. Storage rooms positioned near entrances to sustain long sieges, livestock kept on upper levels to mask sounds from below, and communal kitchens with chimneys cleverly disguised as natural fissures to avoid detection. Who built this underground sanctuary? The most likely architects were early Christians fleeing Roman persecution in the 2nd or 3rd century, though some tunnels may date back to the Hittites 1,000 years earlier. What's certain is that Derinkuyu wasn't alone. Over 200 subterranean complexes riddle Cappadocia, many connected by miles of tunnels, forming a hidden network beneath the surface. But Derinkuyu stands apart for its sheer ambition. This wasn't just a temporary hideout, it was a fully functioning alternate reality, where life could continue for months, even years, while chaos reigned overhead. The most haunting question isn't how they built it, but why they needed to. The answer lies in Cappadocia's history as a crossroads and a battleground. From Persian armies to Arab raiders, this was a landscape where survival meant thinking in 3 dimensions. Yet Derinkuyu's legacy isn't just about fear, it's about resilience. In a world without steel or machinery, these communities carved safety from solid stone, turning vulnerability into an unshakable stronghold. Today, as you descend its steep staircases, running your fingers over grooves worn by countless footsteps, the walls seem to whisper a timeless truth. When faced with existential threats, humans don't just adapt, they reinvent the very ground beneath their feet. Stretching across Ohio's rolling hills like a colossal snake frozen mid-slither, the Great Serpent Mound defies simple explanation. This quarter-mile-long earthwork, its coils perfectly aligned with the summer solstice sunset, isn't just art, it's a cosmological statement carved into the land itself. But what's truly astonishing isn't just its scale or precision. It's that this serpent is merely one thread in a vast tapestry of earthworks crisscrossing North America, built by cultures we're only beginning to understand. From Louisiana's Poverty Point, with its concentric ridges towering 40 feet high, to Wisconsin's effigy mounds shaped like thunderbirds and bears, these structures reveal a continent pulsing with innovation long before Columbus set sail. The genius of these mound builders lies in their intimacy with the earth. Unlike stone pyramids or marble temples, these were landscapes sculpted by hand, basketful by basketful, over generations. At Poverty Point, dating back to 1700 BC, workers moved nearly 2 million cubic yards of soil without beasts of burden or metal tools. a feat equivalent to constructing 30 of Egypt's Great Pyramids in terms of volume. But these weren't just piles of dirt, they were precise astronomical instruments. The site's central plaza aligns with key lunar standstills, while its semicircular ridges may have functioned as a massive solar calendar. Even more intriguing are the artifacts found here, raw materials from as far away as the Great Lakes and the Appalachian Mountains, suggesting trade networks spanning thousands of miles. Then there's the mystery of the Hopewell culture, flourishing between 100 BC and 500 CE across the Ohio River Valley. Their geometric enclosures, often spanning hundreds of acres, weren't defensive walls but ceremonial spaces, some aligned to moonrises, others mirroring celestial patterns. Excavations reveal workshops brimming with obsidian from Wyoming, copper from Lake Superior, and mica from the Carolinas, all crafted into exquisite ritual objects. This wasn't just commerce, it was a continent-wide exchange of ideas, with earthworks serving as gathering places for ceremonies that may have drawn pilgrims from distant regions. What's heartbreaking is how much knowledge has been lost. Early European settlers, convinced such sophistication couldn't be indigenous, attributed the mounds to a mythical, lost race. Later archaeologists, constrained by rigid cultural categories, failed to see the connections between distant sites. Only now, with technologies like ground-penetrating radar, are we uncovering the true extent of these networks: roads linking mounds, hidden plazas beneath modern farmland, even evidence of intentional acoustic designs where certain mounds amplify sound in uncanny ways. The mound builders' legacy isn't just in the earth they moved, but in the questions they force us to ask. How did cultures separated by thousands of miles share such similar visions? Were these earthworks pilgrimage sites, astronomical calculators, or something more profound we've yet to decipher? As bulldozers and plows still threaten undiscovered sites, these silent sentinels of soil remind us that North America's pre-colonial past was anything but primitive. It was a vibrant, interconnected world where the land itself was the greatest canvas for human ingenuity. And with every new discovery, we're forced to rewrite the story of this continent, one basket of dirt at a time. Rising from the turquoise waters of Micronesia like a mirage, Nan Madol is a city that shouldn't exist. Picture 92 artificial islands, each a puzzle of colossal basalt logs stacked like Lincoln logs, crisscrossed by canals so precise they've earned it the nickname, the Venice of the Pacific. But here's the twist: these aren't just any stones. Each hexagonal column weighs up to 50 tons, and the entire complex contains an estimated 750,000 metric tons of rock, all quarried from miles away on the opposite side of Pohnpei Island. How did a society without wheels, pulleys, or metal tools move these megaliths across jungle and ocean? The locals have a theory: magic. According to oral traditions, twin sorcerer kings named Olasipa and Olasopa used a flying dragon to levitate the stones into place. While that might sound like pure myth, modern engineers are just as baffled. The basalt logs are prism-shaped, formed naturally by cooling lava, but their precision placement suggests an understanding of geology and physics far ahead of its time. Some researchers speculate the builders used bamboo rafts or floating platforms during high tide, while others point to coral rubble foundations that might have acted as natural rollers. But even these theories strain credibility. The logistics of transporting thousands of multi-ton stones through dense mangrove forests and treacherous currents remain a mystery. The city's purpose is equally enigmatic. Nan Madol wasn't just a ceremonial center, it was a political powerhouse, home to the Sordelor dynasty that ruled Pohnpei for centuries. The largest structure, the royal mortuary compound of Nan Dowers, features walls 25 feet high, with interior chambers so acoustically perfect that whispers carry eerily across the space. Nearby, submerged tunnels suggest a sophisticated water management system, possibly for aquaculture or ritual purification. Yet despite its grandeur, Nan Madol was abandoned by the 1700s, its canals choked with silt, its temples left to the crabs and creeping vines. What's most haunting isn't just the how, but the why. Building on tidal flats meant constant battles with erosion and mosquitoes, hardly an ideal location for a capital. Some archaeologists think the site's isolation was intentional, a symbolic separation between rulers and commoners. Others believe the canals served as a defensive moat against uprising. But perhaps the most compelling clue lies in the coral reefs themselves. Recent studies show Nan Madol's construction coincided with a period of rising sea levels, suggesting the Sordalours might have been adapting to climate change by building upward, much like modern flood-threatened cities. Today, as saltwater eats at the foundations and storms grow fiercer with climate change, Nan Madol faces a second disappearance, this time for good. UNESCO has labeled it in danger, a race against time to preserve what we still don't fully understand. The stones refuse to give up their secrets easily, but one thing is clear: this wasn't the work of sorcerers. It was the product of a society so ingenious, so determined, that they bent an entire ecosystem to their will. And if we listen closely, their silent canals might still have lessons to teach about resilience, ambition, and the price of building miracles on shifting tides. While the Library of Alexandria often steals the spotlight as antiquity's greatest repository of knowledge, another intellectual powerhouse thrived 1,000 years later, one whose contributions to science, philosophy, and mathematics might have eclipsed even Alexandria's legacy. Baghdad's House of Wisdom wasn't just a library. It was a vibrant think tank, a translation bureau, and a research institution rolled into one. Founded in the early 9th century under the Abbasid Caliphate, this was where the ancient world's scattered wisdom converged, transformed, and propelled humanity forward. Picture a bustling complex where Persian astronomers debated Greek philosophers, Indian mathematicians collaborated with Syrian doctors, and Jewish scholars worked alongside Christian translators, all under the patronage of rulers who saw knowledge as the ultimate currency. At its peak, the House of Wisdom was the Silicon Valley of the medieval world. Here, the works of Aristotle, Ptolemy, and Hippocrates were translated from Greek and Syriac into Arabic, preserving texts that might otherwise have been lost to Europe's dark ages. But the scholars didn't just preserve, they innovated. Al-Khwarizmi, the Persian mathematician whose name gave us the word algorithm, introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals to the Islamic world here, revolutionizing mathematics. Meanwhile, astronomer al-Battani calculated the solar year with near-modern precision, while the Banu Musa brothers designed fantastical automata and wrote treatises on engineering that would inspire Leonardo da Vinci centuries later. The scale of intellectual output was staggering. By some estimates, the house's translators and scholars produced more scientific literature in 2 centuries than Europe had in a millennium. Yet what made the House of Wisdom truly revolutionary was its ethos. Unlike Alexandria, which primarily collected existing knowledge, Baghdad's scholars actively built upon it. They corrected errors in Ptolemy's star charts, expanded Euclid's geometry, and synthesized ideas from as far away as China and India. This was no ivory tower, it was a laboratory where theory met practice. Physicians like al-Razi conducted clinical trials, while geographers like al-Idrisi produced maps so accurate they guided explorers for generations. Even the physical space reflected this spirit of collaboration. Courtyards buzzed with debates, workshops hummed with instrument makers, and scribes worked in shifts to copy texts around the clock. Then came the unthinkable. In 1258, the Mongol warlord Hulagu Khan laid siege to Baghdad. When the city fell, the Tigris ran black with ink from the House of Wisdom's countless manuscripts and red with the blood of its scholars. Survivors spoke of books tossed into flames or drowned in the river, of libraries reduced to ash in days. The destruction was so total that centuries later, historians still argue over the exact location of the complex. Some say the house's legacy didn't just vanish, it was systematically erased, a warning of how quickly enlightenment can be snuffed out by brute force. But here's the twist: the house's light wasn't fully extinguished. In the chaos, some scholars fled westward, carrying precious texts to places like Toledo and Sicily. There, their works were translated into Latin, seeding the European Renaissance. Others found refuge in the Mamluk Empire, where they kept the tradition of inquiry alive. The House of Wisdom's real legacy, then, isn't just in what was lost, it's in the sparks that survived, igniting new fires across the world. Today, as digital libraries face censorship and climate change threatens cultural heritage, the house's story feels painfully urgent. It reminds us that knowledge isn't just stored in books or buildings, it lives in the minds that cherish it and the hands that pass it on against all odds. High in the hills of southern Africa, the stone walls of Great Zimbabwe curve and climb like whispers from an ancient past, a city so magnificent that European explorers, upon stumbling upon its ruins in the late 19th century, simply refused to believe Africans could have built it. The very idea threatened their colonial narrative of a dark continent waiting for civilization, so they spun wild theories: Phoenician traders, Arab settlers, even the biblical Queen of Sheba, anyone but the ancestors of the Shona people who actually carved this metropolis from granite. But the stones don't lie. This was no outpost of foreign influence. It was the heart of a homegrown empire, a hub of wealth and innovation that dominated Indian Ocean trade routes for centuries. What makes Great Zimbabwe's architecture so astonishing isn't just its scale. Though the great enclosure's outer wall stretches 800 feet and stands 36 feet tall in places, but its precision. These builders worked without mortar, stacking thousands of stones so perfectly that even today, you can't slip a knife blade between them. The walls taper upward, their curves echoing the shape of traditional grain bins, while conical towers hint at spiritual symbolism lost to time. And this was no isolated fortress. The city sprawled across nearly 2 square miles, housing up to 18,000 people in stone dwellings, with evidence of goldsmiths, weavers, and artisans whose work reached as far as China and Persia. The proof of Zimbabwe's sophistication lies in the trash heaps. Excavations reveal shards of Ming Dynasty porcelain, Persian glass beads, and Arabian coins, tangible evidence of a trade network stretching halfway across the world. At its peak between the 11th and 15th centuries, this was a city that minted its own currency in gold, regulated commerce through standardized weights, and possibly even controlled the region's ivory and copper markets. The rulers didn't just accumulate wealth, they invested it in infrastructure with intricate drainage systems and terraced farming that sustained the population through dry seasons. Yet the greatest legacy of Great Zimbabwe isn't in its gold or its walls, but in the way its rediscovery shattered racist pseudoscience. When British archaeologist Gertrude Catton Thompson dared to confirm in 1929 that the site was indisputably African in origin, she faced furious backlash from scholars clinging to colonial myths. But the evidence was undeniable. Pottery styles matched local traditions, oral histories pointed to ancestral connections, and the very layout of the city reflected social structures still recognizable in Shona culture today. The city's decline remains as enigmatic as its rise. Some point to overgrazing and deforestation, others to shifting trade routes that bypassed the region. But perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in its abandonment, not as a failure, but as a strategic withdrawal. When resources dwindled, the people moved on, leaving their stone testament behind. Today, as the morning sun catches the granite walls, turning them the color of honey, great Zimbabwe stands as more than ruins. It's a rebuttal to centuries of erasure, a monument to African ingenuity that refused to be buried, no matter how hard outsiders tried to dig its story up and claim it for themselves. Lulan wasn't just a city, it was a miracle in the middle of nowhere. Perched on the edge of China's Taklamakan Desert, this oasis thrived as a vital pit stop for Silk Road caravans hauling silk, spices, and ideas between East and West. Picture a bustling hub where Sogdian merchants bartered with Han officials, where Buddhist monks shared scriptures with Zoroastrian traders, all shaded by poplar trees and nourished by glacial rivers. Then, around the 4th century, the rivers changed course, the winds piled sand dunes against its walls, and Lulan vanished so completely that for over 1,000 years, its existence faded into legend. The Taklamakan didn't just swallow Lulan, it preserved it. When Swedish explorer Sven Hedin rediscovered the city in 1900, he found wooden houses still standing, their doorframes intact, their lintels carved with intricate vines and serpents. In one home, a skeleton lay curled beside an ancient hearth, as if its owner had simply dozed off. Archaeologists later uncovered tax records on wooden slips, revealing a multilingual bureaucracy that managed caravans like a medieval customs office. But the most haunting finds were the mummies perfectly preserved by the arid climate. Their felt hats and woolen cloaks dyed vibrant blues and reds, their European features contradicting later notions of the Silk Road as a purely Eastern trade route. Lulan's fate wasn't unique. Dozens of Silk Road oasis cities, Nia, Murin, Krorena, met similar ends, buried under dunes as tall as apartment buildings. The culprit, a lethal cocktail of climate shifts and human hubris. Ancient texts describe how settlers diverted rivers to irrigate cotton fields, unaware they were gambling with the desert's patience. When natural droughts hit, the water table dropped, the trees died, and the dunes marched in like an invading army. Sound familiar? Today, the Taklamakan is expanding at a rate of 2 miles per year, swallowing villages just as it did Lulan. China's Great Green Wall, a mammoth reforestation project, is a modern attempt to hold back the tide, proof that the Silk Road's lessons are anything but ancient history. What makes these lost oases so poignant isn't just their demise, but their defiance. At Murin, archaeologists found Buddhist frescoes where the artists mixed pigments with camel milk, ensuring their colors would outlast the sands. At Nia, love letters written in Kharosthi script whisper across millennia, a merchant promising his wife he'll return with jade from cotton. These weren't just way stations, they were experiments in multicultural survival, places where people from opposite ends of the earth built something fragile and beautiful, knowing the desert could reclaim it all. As satellite imagery reveals more buried cities beneath the Taklamakan's waves of sand, their ghosts urge us to listen. The Silk Road wasn't just about what was traded, it was about the places that made trade possible, and the stark truth that no matter how rich or connected a society becomes, it's always one shifting dune away from becoming a footnote. Yet there's hope in their ruins too. Just as Lulan's mummies taught us about Bronze Age migrations, these cities' irrigation mistakes might yet teach us how to fight desertification today. After all, the Silk Road's greatest legacy isn't the goods that moved along it, but the indelible proof that even in the harshest places, humans will always carve out spaces to meet, exchange, and dream until the very sand swallows those dreams whole. Teotihuacan rises from the Mexican highlands like a question carved in stone. Its very name, the place where the gods were created, was given by the Aztecs centuries after its collapse, a testament to how completely its original identity had vanished. Walking down the Avenue of the Dead today, flanked by the Pyramid of the Sun and Moon, you're treading the same cobbles that mystified even the Aztec emperors. They revered these ruins as divine handiwork, unable to believe mere humans could have built such grandeur. And in a way, they were right, because despite a century of archaeology, we still don't know who designed this metropolis, what language they spoke, or why they abandoned it nearly 2,000 years ago. What's staggering isn't just the scale, though the Pyramid of the Sun remains one of the largest structures ever built in the ancient Americas, but the precision. The entire city aligns with celestial events like the Pleiades' zenith passage, while its grid layout follows sacred ratios found in Mesoamerican cosmology. The builders painted entire temples with liquid mercury to simulate sacred rivers, and their murals depict fantastical beings with owl eyes and jaguar claws, hinting at a mythology we can only guess at. Even more puzzling are the apartment compounds, not crude huts, but multi-story homes with plaster floors, drainage systems, and shared courtyards, suggesting a society that blended communal living with urban sophistication. Then there's the mystery of the masks. Hundreds of stone faces have been unearthed, each strikingly similar yet subtly unique, with polished teardrops beneath their eyes. Were they portraits of rulers, ritual objects? The closest comparison comes from the later Maya, but Teotihuacan's masks predate Maya classicism by centuries. This cultural debt ripples through history. The Maya adopted Teotihuacan's warrior iconography, the Zapotecs copied its talud table row architecture, and the Aztecs modeled their capital Tenochtitlan after its sacred layout. Yet the source of all this influence remains anonymous, its creators leaving no royal tombs or deciphered texts to tell their story. The city's end is just as enigmatic. Around 550 CE, a catastrophic fire swept through the ceremonial center, burning so intensely it cracked stone monuments. But this wasn't an accident. Someone systematically smashed idols and sealed off temples first. Was it an uprising, an invading force, or something darker like a ritual termination, a belief that the city had to be killed to release its power? The only clues are mass graves filled with bound skeletons, their hands tied behind their backs with cords that left grooves in the bone. Teotihuacan's greatest lesson might be about the fluidity of legacy. Here was a civilization so influential that its echoes shaped cultures for a millennium, yet so anonymous that we can't even name it. Its pyramids now bear Aztec labels. Its artifacts sit in museums labeled Classic Mesoamerican, and its true purpose, whether a pilgrimage site, an empire's capital, or something stranger, remains just out of reach. As you climb the Pyramid of the Sun at dawn, watching shadows stretch across the Avenue of the Dead, the stones seem to whisper that immortality isn't about who builds a city, but what that city builds in others. And perhaps that's why, after all these centuries, Teotihuacan still feels less like a ruin and more like a mirror reflecting back whatever meaning we dare to bring to it. At the edge of the known world, where glaciers claw at the sea, lie the ghostly remains of a Viking dream turned to ice. The Norse settlements of Greenland weren't just outposts, they were full-fledged medieval communities, complete with stone churches, dairy farms, and even bishops appointed by the Pope. For over 400 years, these Scandinavian colonists thrived in a landscape so harsh it still defies belief. They raised cattle in meadows that are now permafrost, hunted walrus for ivory exports to Europe, and built turf-walled longhouses that stood firm against Arctic gales. Then, around the 15th century, silence fell. The last written record is a wedding contract from 1408. After that, only bones, ruins, and a chilling question: how could people so tough, so resourceful, vanish without a trace? The answer lies in the ice cores. Layers of ancient snowfall, drilled from Greenland's glaciers, tell a story of climatic betrayal. When Eric the Red first landed in 986, the island was in the grip of the medieval warm period, a time when temperatures in the North Atlantic rivaled those of today. Grass grew where there's now only rock and ice, and the Norse could farm much as they had in Norway. But by the 1300s, the Little Ice Age began its slow creep. Winters lengthened, sea ice choked the fjords, cutting off trade routes. The soil grew too cold for barley, and the hay needed to sustain their prized cattle became scarce. Yet the Norse stubbornly held to their European identity, refusing to adopt the survival strategies of their Inuit neighbors, who'd thrived in Greenland for centuries. Archaeologists find heartbreaking evidence of this cultural stubbornness. In middens at the abandoned farm of Gardar, cattle bones dominate even in the settlement's final layers, proof that the Norse kept starving their dwindling herds rather than switch to seal meat, which they considered inferior food. Their churches grew more ornate even as famine loomed, with imported stained glass and bronze bells. Meanwhile, Inuit artifacts found near the Norse sites show a people perfectly adapted to the changing climate: flexible kayaks for hunting seal, warm caribou skin clothing, and harpoons that could harvest food from the icebound sea. The two cultures occasionally traded Norse metal for Inuit walrus ivory, but the Vikings never learned the lessons that might have saved them. The parallels to modern climate crises are impossible to ignore. Like the Norse, we've built societies optimized for conditions that may not last. Our cities cling to coastlines as seas rise, our farms strain against droughts, and our economies rely on systems vulnerable to disruption. But Greenland's lesson isn't just about adaptation, it's about the blindness of cultural pride. The Norse didn't fail because they lacked resilience, they failed because their identity became a cage. When the last Greenlander died alone in a crumbling longhouse perhaps, or on a desperate boat journey back to Iceland, they took with them a warning etched in ice: survival favors not the strongest but the most adaptable. And sometimes the hardest thing to change isn't our tools but our minds. Çatalhöyük isn't just one of the world's oldest cities, it's one of the weirdest. Picture a honeycomb of mud brick homes so tightly packed that there weren't even streets between them. To get around, you'd climb a ladder onto your roof, then hop across a maze of terraces to visit neighbors, descending through another hole into their living space. This 9,000-year-old settlement in southern Turkey turns every assumption about early urban life on its head. No palaces, no temples, no obvious rulers, just a sprawling egalitarian puzzle where the dead were buried beneath the floors and the walls pulsed with art so vibrant it feels fresh as yesterday. What's astonishing isn't just the lack of hierarchy, but the abundance of creativity. Nearly every excavated home boasts elaborate murals, geometric patterns, hunting scenes, even what might be the world's earliest landscape painting, depicting a twin-peaked volcano erupting nearby. Some walls bear handprints, not crude smears, but precise outlines made by blowing pigment around fingers pressed to the plaster. Then there are the sculptures, clay goddess figurines with exaggerated curves, leopards molded in relief, and bull skulls coated in plaster and painted, their horns protruding like ceremonial crowns. This wasn't just decoration, it was a visual language, a way of binding the community to the rhythms of nature and myth. The absence of doors and streets speaks volumes. Without alleys or thoroughfares, Çatalhöyük's people lived literally on top of one another, sharing rooftops as communal space. Archaeologists find no evidence of wealth disparity. Homes are roughly the same size with similar artifacts. Even the dead were treated equally, tucked under platforms in sleeping areas regardless of age or status. But don't mistake this for simplicity. The builders engineered their homes to last, mixing mud with lime for waterproofing, reinforcing walls with timber, and even designing ventilation systems to manage smoke from open hearths. Why structure a city this way? Some theorize it was defense. No streets meant no invading armies could march through. Others point to symbolism, with rooftops as a liminal space between earthly and spiritual realms. The most compelling clue lies in the art itself. Many murals show wild animals, bulls, bears, vultures, sometimes alongside humans in what might be shamanic rituals. This was a society deeply entangled with the natural world, perhaps structuring their physical space to reflect cosmic beliefs. Then there's the mystery of the skulls. In some homes, researchers uncovered curated human skulls plastered and painted to recreate faces, then displayed in niches. Were these revered ancestors? Trophy heads. The practice echoes later Neolithic traditions across the region, hinting at a cultural web far more connected than we once imagined. Çatalhöyük's quiet revolution wasn't about monuments or conquest, it was about reimagining what a city could be. For over 2 millennia, this rooftop civilization thrived without kings or walls, proving that urban life doesn't require hierarchy to flourish. As we dig deeper into its maze of homes, each layer revealing new bursts of color, new whispers of ritual, the message is clear. Sometimes the most radical innovations aren't in how we build our cities, but in how we choose to live together within them. And in that, these rooftop dwellers might just have been millennia ahead of their time. Beneath the turquoise waters of Kingston Harbor lies a time capsule of sin and suffering, Port Royal, the pirate capital of the Americas that plunged into the sea in a single catastrophic morning. Unlike the mythical Atlantis or the majestic Petra, this city's legacy isn't one of lost wisdom or artistic triumph, but a raw, unvarnished glimpse into the brutal machinery of colonialism. On June 7, 1692, just before noon, the earth convulsed so violently that entire streets slid into the Caribbean, swallowing brothels, taverns, and slave auctions mid-transaction. The ruins didn't just sink, they were flash-frozen in disaster, preserving a 17th-century Gomorrah where gold-laden buccaneers rubbed elbows with British naval officers, and human lives were traded as casually as bolts of silk. Divers exploring the submerged streets today find a dystopian inventory of empire. Spanish silver coins minted in Panama, Venetian glass beads used to buy enslaved Africans, and pewter tankards still stacked as if awaiting the next round at the infamous Lime Street taverns. One particularly haunting discovery, a child's iron shackle, too small for an adult's ankle, silently testifies to the city's role as the Caribbean's busiest slave market. But Port Royal wasn't just a den of iniquity, it was a meticulously engineered hub of exploitation. The British Crown turned a blind eye to piracy here because the pirates served a purpose. They harassed Spanish ships, weakening England's rival while funneling stolen treasure into colonial coffers. The city's layout reflected this calculated chaos. Warehouses near the docks held plundered goods inventoried with bureaucratic precision, while the King's House hosted lavish parties where governors toasted with wine poured from sacramental chalices looted from Peruvian churches. The earthquake's violence was so sudden it captured moments of eerie intimacy. Archaeologists uncovered a pocket watch frozen at 11:43 a.m., the exact moment the first tremor hit. A skeleton sprawled mid-stride near a collapsed tavern, clutching a jug of rum, while another lay buried with a pipe still clamped between their teeth. But the disaster wasn't entirely an act of God. Port Royal had been built on a precarious sand spit, its foundations weakened by years of reckless construction and groundwater extraction. When the quake struck, the loose ground liquefied, turning streets into quicksand. The pious called it divine retribution. The surviving merchants simply rebuilt nearby, business as usual. What makes Port Royal's ruins uniquely unsettling is their lack of romance. There are no grand temples or mysterious scripts, just the stark debris of greed and violence. Even the famed pirate Henry Morgan, whose exploits bankrolled the city's excesses, died before the quake and was buried in a cemetery that promptly sank. His coffin reportedly bobbed to the surface during the disaster, as if the sea itself rejected him. Today, as climate change threatens to drown modern coastal cities, Port Royal's fate feels less like history and more like a grim preview. The difference: when this city fell, the world barely blinked. The slave trade continued, empires kept expanding, and the ocean's hunger for human hubris went unheeded. The real tragedy of Port Royal isn't that it was lost, it's that its lessons were never truly learned. Long before the Maya etched their calendars or the Aztecs built Tenochtitlan, the Olmecs were shaping the foundations of Mesoamerican civilization with nothing but stone tools and sheer ingenuity. Imagine workers in the sweltering lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, hauling 20-ton blocks of basalt across 60 miles of jungle without wheels or pack animals. Their masterpiece, the colossal head's massive stone portraits with thick lips, flattened noses, and enigmatic helmets, each carved from a single boulder with such precision that their individuality suggests they might be actual rulers. But these sculptures weren't just art. They were declarations of power, proof that a society could move mountains literally to immortalize its leaders. The Olmecs didn't stop at sculpture. At La Venta, their ceremonial heart, they engineered a landscape as meticulously as any modern architect. Pyramids weren't just stacked dirt, they were layered with colored clays and aligned to celestial events. Hidden beneath the Great Pyramid, archaeologists found a stunning mosaic floor depicting a jaguar mask, buried like a sacred secret. Even more astonishing, their drainage systems, using serpentine blocks, they built underground channels to control water flow, a technology so advanced it wouldn't be matched until the Mayas' heyday 1,000 years later. This wasn't just construction. It was hydrological genius in a land where torrential rains could erase lesser works in a season. Yet for all their innovation, the Olmecs remain frustratingly silent. Unlike later Mesoamerican cultures, they left no deciphered writing. No king lists, just cryptic symbols on celts and stelae that might be early glyphs. Their decline around 400 BC is equally mysterious. There's no evidence of invasion, just abandoned cities and a cultural vacuum that lasted centuries. Some theories point to environmental shifts, rivers changing course, volcanic eruptions disrupting trade routes, while others suggest internal revolt against a ruling class too focused on monument building. Whatever the cause, their legacy didn't die. The Olmecs' fingerprints are everywhere in later Mesoamerica. The Maya borrowed their ballgame rituals, the Zapotecs replicated their ceremonial layouts, and the Aztecs collected Olmec artifacts like sacred heirlooms. Even the iconic feathered serpent, later known as Quetzalcoatl, first slithered into myth as an Olmec deity. Their most enduring gift might be the very idea of urban life, a proof that scattered villages could coalesce into something greater, fueled by shared belief and collective labor. Today, as laser scans reveal hidden Olmec structures beneath the jungle, we're still catching up to their brilliance. They weren't just America's first engineers, they were its first visionaries, turning swamp and stone into the blueprint for an entire cultural tradition. And in that, their colossal heads still watch over us, silent guardians of a past we're only beginning to understand. High on the windswept plateau of central Turkey, the ruins of Hattusa whisper a tale of an empire that once rivaled Egypt and Babylon, then vanished so completely that later civilizations built new cities atop its rubble without realizing what lay beneath. The Hittites weren't just another Bronze Age kingdom. They were masters of diplomacy and war, the first to forge a peace treaty with Egypt sealed with a royal marriage, no less, and innovators who perfected iron smelting while others still struggled with bronze. Their capital wasn't just a political center. It was a sprawling fortress city with walls that snaked across hilltops for nearly 4 miles, punctuated by monumental gates guarded by stone lions and sphinxes. Yet by 1200 BC, Hattusa lay abandoned, its people scattered, its name erased from memory for over 3,000 years. The story of Hattusa's rediscovery reads like an archaeological thriller. In the early 1900s, German archaeologist Hugo Winkler began excavating a nondescript mound near the village of Bogaskale. Beneath the soil, he uncovered something extraordinary, a royal archive housing over 30,000 cuneiform tablets. These weren't just administrative records, they were diplomatic correspondence, legal codes, and even detailed accounts of battles, all written in a language no one could decipher. The key turned out to be a single phrase repeated on multiple tablets. "Thus speaks the king of Hatti." That tiny clue, matched with mentions in Egyptian texts, confirmed this was indeed the lost Hittite capital. But the real shock came when translators realized these tablets preserved entire genres of literature thought lost forever, including a Babylonian epic older than the Gilgamesh saga. What makes Hattusa's tablets so revolutionary isn't just their content, but what they reveal about Bronze Age geopolitics. Here were meticulous records of treaties, spy reports, and even royal apologies, like one where a Hittite king pleads with an Assyrian ruler over a botched trade deal. The famous Kadesh peace treaty with Egypt, carved in hieroglyphs at Karnak, was found here in its original Akkadian version, proving the Hittites operated on a global stage. Their legal codes were startlingly progressive: fines instead of executions for most crimes, protections for women's property rights, and even compensation guidelines for workplace injuries. This was a society that balanced brute military might with bureaucratic sophistication, all while fending off invasions and managing a multi-ethnic empire. Then came the collapse, one of history's most debated mysteries. Around 1200 BCE, Hattusa's gates were sealed from within, its temples emptied, its granaries left full. No evidence of sacking, no mass graves, just a deliberate, orderly evacuation. Climate data tells part of the story. Tree rings from that era show years of drought and famine across Anatolia. But newer theories suggest a perfect storm: migrating sea peoples disrupting trade routes, rebellions in vassal states, and perhaps even a coup that shattered central authority. The Hittites didn't so much fall as dissolve, their empire fragmenting into petty kingdoms that Assyrian annals later dismissed as the lands of the forgotten Hatti. The eerie silence of Hattusa's abandonment speaks volumes about how history gets written. For centuries, our knowledge of the Bronze Age came primarily from Egyptian and Mesopotamian records, which painted the Hittites as barbaric outsiders. Their own tablets buried under collapsed walls told a different story, one of a complex, literate society that simply lacked survivors to preserve its narrative. Today, as 3D scans reconstruct the city's towering temples and secret tunnels, we're forced to confront a humbling truth: the past isn't just what happened, it's what gets remembered. And sometimes the most powerful voices are those that emerge from the dust when no one's left to silence them. Standing on the windswept slopes of Rapa Nui, the Moai stare inland with hollow eyes, silent, witnesses to one of history's most haunting ecological cautionary tales. These towering stone giants, some weighing over 80 tons, weren't just artistic triumphs. They were the heartbeat of a society that literally moved mountains to honor their ancestors. But the same obsession that fueled their creation may have sealed the island's fate. Every statue required immense resources: trees felled for rollers and levers, ropes woven from shredded bark, food to sustain the laborers. Over centuries, what began as sustainable veneration spiraled into an ecological death spiral, leaving behind a landscape so barren that early European explorers assumed it had always been a wasteland. The tragedy of Rapa Nui isn't just about deforestation. It's about the slow, collective blindness that precedes collapse. Pollen samples from ancient lakebeds tell a startling story. This wasn't always a treeless rock. When Polynesian settlers arrived around 1200 CE, they found a subtropical paradise blanketed in palm forests teeming with birds. The soil was rich, the waters plentiful. Yet by the time Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived in 1722, he described a wretched, impoverished land where locals burned grass for warmth. The clues to this transformation lie in the Moai themselves. As rival clans competed to build ever larger statues, they clear-cut the forests that once stabilized the soil. Without tree roots to hold it, the topsoil washed into the sea, crippling agriculture. Without timber, they couldn't build fishing canoes to access offshore protein. Even the statue's transport methods became impossible. Researchers estimate hauling a single Moai required hundreds of trees as rollers, a luxury the island eventually couldn't spare. But here's where the story twists. Recent archaeology suggests the Rapa Nui people didn't passively succumb to disaster. They adapted with breathtaking ingenuity. When the last tree fell, they shifted to stone-lined garden pits called manavai that trapped moisture and nutrients, growing crops in volcanic rock. They turned to the only remaining resource in abundance, the very stones they'd once carved. Later Moai bases show signs of being repurposed into tools, while oral traditions speak of a radical cultural shift from ancestor worship to the birdman cult, where leaders were chosen through an annual competition to retrieve seabird eggs from offshore islets. This wasn't a society that collapsed overnight. It was one that transformed under extreme pressure, finding ways to survive even as their world shrank around them. The parallels to modern climate crises are impossible to ignore. Like Rapa Nui, we're locked in patterns of consumption that strain our ecosystems, from burning fossil fuels to overfishing the oceans. The difference: we can see the warning signs they missed. Ice cores and satellite data give us real-time snapshots of glacial melt and deforestation, while indigenous knowledge offers models for sustainable living honed over millennia. Yet the greatest lesson of Rapa Nui isn't about doom, it's about resilience. After European contact brought slavery and disease, the survivors didn't vanish. They endured, blending old traditions with painful new realities. Today, their descendants still carve replicas of the Moai, not as symbols of hubris, but as reminders of cultural survival. The statue's empty sockets seem to ask, will we heed the whispers of our own tilting ecosystems, or will future generations inherit our silent, stony warnings? Buried within the baked clay tablets and carved seals of Mohenjo-Daro lies a riddle that has stumped linguists for over a century: the Indus script. 4,000 distinct symbols dance across these artifacts, some resembling fish and birds, others abstract geometric patterns, all arranged in careful sequences that hint at a sophisticated writing system. Yet, unlike the Rosetta Stone that cracked Egyptian hieroglyphs, no bilingual inscription has ever surfaced to serve as a key. What makes this script so tantalizing isn't just its indecipherability, but what it might reveal about one of history's most enigmatic civilizations. Were these symbols accounting records tracking shipments of cotton and lapis lazuli, sacred hymns to forgotten deities, or perhaps something more radical, an early form of democratic governance encoded in clay? The challenge begins with the script's brevity. Most inscriptions are frustratingly short, averaging just 5 symbols, with the longest topping out at 26. Without longer text statistical analysis, the tool that unlocked other ancient scripts hits a wall. Some researchers argue these aren't words at all, but non-linguistic symbols akin to modern traffic signs or corporate logos. But the patterning suggests otherwise. Symbols frequently cluster in repeating sequences, and their distribution mirrors later writing systems. Common words appearing on seals found across the Indus Valley, rarer ones restricted to single sites. Then there's the directional evidence. Some symbols appear compressed on the right side of tablets, as if the scribe was running out of space, a telltale sign of cursive writing. Recent breakthroughs offer glimmers of hope. Computer analysis has identified a potential grammatical structure, with certain symbols acting like prefixes or suffixes. One study even claims to have isolated symbols for fish and star, based on their frequent pairing with pictorial carvings. But the real game changer might lie in the subcontinent's living languages. Some scholars propose links between Indus symbols and early Dravidian scripts, pointing to striking similarities between a recurring fish-like glyph and the Tamil word for fish, min. If proven, it could rewrite the linguistic history of South Asia, suggesting cultural continuities stretching back millennia. The stakes transcend academic curiosity. Decoding the script could finally answer why Mohenjo-Daro's streets lacked palaces or temples, why its weights and measures were so standardized, how it sustained trade networks stretching from Mesopotamia to the Himalayas. Every undeciphered symbol is a locked door. Behind one might lie the blueprint for history's first egalitarian metropolis, behind another a lost creation myth, behind yet another mundane grocery lists that would humanize these people more than any artifact. Until we find that Rosetta Stone or invent an AI capable of cracking 4,000-year-old context clues, the voices of the Indus remain just out of earshot, a whisper of syllables trapped in clay, waiting for the right mind to listen. Skyscrapers loom over deserted streets in Ordos, China, a modern metropolis built for 1 million people that now echoes with the footsteps of just a few thousand. Half a world away in Detroit, entire neighborhoods of Art Deco masterpieces stand hollow, their grand facades crumbling as nature reclaims vacant lots. These aren't ancient ruins, they're snapshots of urban collapse happening in real time, proving that the forces which buried Petra and Mohenjo-Daro never truly disappeared. The eerie familiarity between modern ghost cities and their ancient counterparts reveals an uncomfortable truth. Civilizations still rise and fall by the same fragile rules, whether their buildings are made of stone or steel. What sets today's abandoned landscapes apart is the speed of their unraveling. Where Teotihuacan took centuries to fade, China's empty cities like Kangbashi became cautionary tales within decades, monuments to speculative excess, where developers built gleaming financial districts before anyone arrived to fill them. Satellite images show rows of empty high-rises encircling half-finished shopping malls, their glass facades reflecting only clouds. Meanwhile, in America's Rust Belt, places like Centralia, Pennsylvania burn silently from underground coal fires, while Pripyat near Chernobyl stands frozen in 1986, its bumper cars rusting in an amusement park that never opened. These sites aren't just failures, They're time capsules of very modern hubris where economic shocks, environmental mismanagement, or geopolitical gambles outpaced any chance of adaptation. Yet the most haunting parallels emerge along coastlines. Just as rising seas drowned Heracleion and Port Royal, modern megacities from Miami to Jakarta now battle routine flooding, sinking faster than seawalls can be raised. Venice's Aqua Alta events grow more severe, while in Louisiana, entire communities like Isle de Jean Charles have become climate refugees as saltwater swallows their ancestral lands. Future archaeologists might one day dive among submerged subway tunnels and flooded data centers, piecing together how 21st century societies ignored warnings written plainly in drowned cities from the past. What will these ruins say about us? A dig through Detroit's derelict Packard plant could reveal layers of industrial glory, racial tensions, and globalization's fallout, all preserved in graffiti-strewn factories where vines twist through assembly lines. The skeletal frames of Spain's bankrupt Ciudad Real airport might whisper of pre-financial crisis exuberance, while Dubai's artificial Palm Islands could become our generation's version of Nan Madol, or inspiring engineering feats undone by ecological reality. Unlike ancient collapses shrouded in mystery, our abandoned spaces come with digital paper trails, server farms full of emails and blueprints that could survive millennia in silica, offering future scholars an unprecedented look at decline in real time. The lesson isn't that our cities are doomed, but that they're mortal. From Çatalhöyük to Chicago, urban survival has always depended on balancing ambition with flexibility. The difference now is that we can see the patterns if we choose to look, as satellite imagery uncovers new Maya cities beneath Guatemalan jungle, LiDAR reveals Anker's hidden suburbs, and sonar maps Heracleion's drowned temples. We're reminded that every civilization leaves footprints. The question is whether ours will serve as warnings or wisdom for those who come after, and whether we'll be the last generation to walk these streets or the first to rewrite their fate. From Göbekli Tepe's sacred stones to Cahokia's silent mounds, these lost cities aren't just relics of the past, they're mirrors reflecting our own fragile existence. Think about it, every one of these places was once the height of human achievement, bustling with life, ambition, and ingenuity. The people who walked their streets never imagined their world could vanish, just as we struggle to picture our own cities as future ruins. Yet here's the humbling truth, civilizations don't collapse because they lack brilliance. The Maya had celestial calendars precise enough to make modern astronomers nod in respect. The Indus Valley engineered drainage systems that put some modern cities to shame. Their downfall wasn't ignorance, it was the slow, creeping weight of challenges they couldn't adapt to in time. Take climate change, the thread connecting so many of these stories. The Greenland Vikings clung to European farming methods as temperatures dropped, while the Maya doubled down on water-intensive crops during droughts. Contrast that with the Nabateans of Petra, who turned desert scarcity into an art form, or the ancestral Puebloans who abandoned Choco Canyon when the rains failed, migrating to greener valleys. Adaptation isn't just about technology, it's about flexibility of thought, the willingness to abandon what no longer serves us. As rising seas inch closer to Miami and Venice, as megadroughts parch the American West, these ancient choices suddenly feel less like history and more like a playbook we'd be foolish to ignore. But the real lesson isn't doom, it's perspective. For every lost city, there's a surprise waiting to rewrite our assumptions. Who would have guessed that hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe's temples before inventing agriculture, or that the egalitarian streets of Mohenjo-Daro could challenge our notions of early governance? These discoveries remind us that human potential has always been broader, stranger, and more creative than textbooks allow. The past isn't a single path progressing toward our present. It's a tangle of experiments, dead ends, and flashes of genius that might still inspire solutions today. So the next time you walk down a city street, pause for a moment. Imagine the layers beneath your feet, not just pipes and subways, but the ghosts of places like Heracleion, now whispering through shipwrecks under Mediterranean waves, or Teotihuacan, its true name forgotten but its pyramids still aligning with the stars. Their stones urge us to ask, what will future archaeologists sift from our own foundations? Glass towers, plastic waste, or perhaps, if we're wise, evidence that we learned from those who came before. If this journey through fallen metropolises has sparked your curiosity, don't let it end here. Click like if you want more deep dives into history's untold stories. Subscribe to join our community of fellow time travelers, and drop a comment below. Tell us which lost city resonates with you most. Was it the underwater enigma of Heracleion, the cosmic precision of Tikal, or the cliff-carved majesty of Petra? Every like, share, and conversation helps keep these stories alive. Because the past isn't finished speaking. From the desert sands to the ocean floor, the echoes of these cities still have secrets to share if we're willing.